Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everyone. Some of you may have seen the video footage of an attack that took place over the weekend in South London. It's two police officers being really violently assaulted in the street. And somebody, and we won't name the person, but somebody recorded all of this on their iPhone and gave a commentary over the top, which effectively was mocking what was happening to the police officers. It's pretty sick. If you go to lbc.co.uk, you can see the footage of it. It's part, it seems to me, of what is going on in London. And let's not forget other cities too, where we do appear to be completely losing control of the streets. Yeah, it's the stabbings, it's the murders that actually make the news, but the level of violent assaults is going through the roof as well. And I'm somebody who wants to be pro the police. I really am. I've had police officers in my family, one very senior one too, and I'm naturally pro the police. And when I see the figures that there were over 26,000 assaults on police officers in England and Wales over the course of the last year, I think, cripes, what a very difficult job to be doing these days. And of course, if they're seen to overreact, they're the ones that finish up in trouble with the law. So they at all times have to use reasonable force, which means the other side go to the extreme before they're able to up the ante. So I do naturally feel sorry for the police, and please do go to lbc.co.uk, have a look at this footage. It is very shocking. Now, that all led today to a reaction from Ken Marsh, who is head of the Metropolitan Police Federation, and here he was talking to Nick Ferrari on the LBC Breakfast Show this morning.
If you're prepared to just stand and watch anyone, police or anyone else, being assaulted in the way my colleagues were being assaulted, and you think it's the right way to go about life, to just stand there laughing, mocking them and filming them instead of trying to assist to stop someone being injured, then it speaks for itself, I think.
I hear what you say, that there is the danger, Mr. Marsh, that I try and get involved, and in fact I make the situation worse because they then turn on me as well, and your blokes or women are then trying to look after me because I've tried to get involved and are not sufficiently trained. You're aware of that?
Absolutely, 100%. I'm not for 1 minute saying to the public, all step in, we're trained to do what we do. What I am trying to get across is surely intervention is better than standing mocking at my colleagues and filming what they're doing for salacious pleasure to others. That's the point I'm trying to get across.
Well, Ken Marsh, I agree with you that the idea of mocking our police officers being assaulted and hurt is awful, as it would be anybody. It is awful. But I'm not quite so sure that it's as simple as this. I'm not quite so sure that we should come to the aid of the police when they're in trouble is as simple as this. Two reasons. Firstly, of course, if we go in and we're seen to have used excessive force, we could be charged with assault, and there is a very real risk of that. But there's something, folks, deeper going on here. I said to you that I'm naturally pro-police, and I want to be pro-police. But I do wonder whether I feel the police are really supporting us. I mean, back in 2015, we saw a signal of a new kind of policing coming from Sarah Thornton, the head of the National Chief Police Council.
I think what we're saying is that if we're really serious about putting a lot of effort and resource into protecting children, for example, that might mean that if you've had a burglary, for example, and the burglar has fled, that we won't get there as quickly as we've got there in the past. Of course, we will still want to gather evidence, but we might do it in different ways. So it's about thinking about what it means to really focus on the crimes that really cause risk and harm, particularly to our young people and other vulnerable people.
So if you've been burgled, there's no particular reason now why the police will even turn up at all. In fact, they may well tell you to register the burglary online. And do you know something? For most people, their house being burgled is one of the absolutely most distressing things that ever happens in their lives. And one of the things they need, think of a sort of single person, an elderly single person. One of the things they need is a bit of personal reassurance. And it's one of the things that I think traditionally the British Bobby was seen to be very, very good at. And that's followed by other headlines. You know, not practical for the Met Police to investigate all crime. And what about this? I mean, you know, there's an old saying about the fish rotting from the head down. You remember the appalling Westminster Bridge attack. Khalid Massoud, he ran over and killed people on the bridge in the car. He crashed the car. If you remember, he then ran round the front of the Palace of Westminster and he went into the yard where he attacked the unarmed PC Keith Palmer, who he stabbed to death. You all remember those horrendous scenes, and me, certainly, in the light of that and London Bridge and everything else. I think the absolute minimum our police officers should have is a taser gun. That's the absolute minimum they should have. But what was most extraordinary about that was that the acting head of the Metropolitan Police at the time, Sir Craig Mackey, was there in a police car watching all this happening and not intervening. He said, I could see PC Palmer moving backwards and him going down. And what did Sir Craig Mackey do at the time, who was the acting head of the Met Police? He locked the car doors to make sure he was okay. So if the guy at the top is not prepared to intervene when a police officer is in trouble, and I do understand, Ken Marsh, head of the Met Police Federation, that you do want the public support, but what kind of example is that? And what about the fact, when Sarah Thornton talks about the prioritisation of police and what they do, what about the fact that 1,000 police officers in the Met are investigating hate crime? I'll give you an example of something that happened within the Met Police area to me. Myself, my family were attacked by a mob of about 80 protesters, all claiming all sorts of grievances against things that I'd said and done. And they were threatening in many ways, so much so the children ran away and hid in the graveyard. We went off in the car. They came up and smashed the car. They wrote the car off whilst we were sitting inside it. It was violent. It was bad. Do you know something? Not one single prosecution. Yet, can you imagine if I'd said something to one of the diversity protesters that had been taken to be an ism of some kind? I bet I'd have been charged with a hate crime. And my problem, Ken Marsh, is I want to help the police, but I'm not so sure the police are helping us anymore. And I know there have been cutbacks, and I know it is difficult, and I know that the rise of violent crime is not the fault of the police. There are bad things happening in our society, but my feeling is that this is a two-way street, and before we are going to put ourselves in harm's way to help the police, we need to feel that they are on our side, and right at the moment, I don't. So, tell me, is Ken Marsh right to say we need to back the police, or do you feel a bit like me, that we need to be a bit more supported by them? And if you think, no, Ken Marsh is right, whatever the circumstances, we must get involved physically and help the police if they're in trouble, call 0345 6060 973. If you think, really, rather like me, that actually they need to be a bit more on our side, text to 84850 and tell me any experiences you've had with the police that make you think they either really are on your side or perhaps somehow they've got different priorities these days. And you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, I know those of you that watch us on Facebook are never shy on commenting at all. Let's go to Alistair, a new caller from Chelmsford. Good evening, Alistair.
Good evening, Nigel.
So what would you do? Would you take a risk? Would you put yourself out of the way to help the police if you saw they were in trouble?
I've been in two scenarios. One, I used to be managing nightclubs, and I thought it was in a difficult situation.
Alistair, I want to get your story, but the line's shocking. Going to go to Chris, a new caller from Barking. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Nigel.
So, do you have experience of this?
Right, basically, my brother was held up at knife point a couple of weeks back, and the police failed to attend the actual crime scene. Instead, he was told to go home, and they'll attend to him when they have the officers available. So if I was in that situation and the police needed help, then yeah, I would step in.
You would step in, but your brother was held at knife point.
Yeah,
and the police.
They didn't have any officers available at the time to get to the scene.
And how does that make you feel about modern policing in East London?
Well, it's infuriating that police are stretched out so thin. I blame the cutbacks mainly, and the public's losing faith in them.
Yes, that's
as a result of it.
Yeah, well, Chris, that's the point I'm making. I think we are beginning to lose faith in the police, and this is not necessarily the fault of individual police officers. Chris, do you know something? At any one time, of all the people serving in the Metropolitan Police, only 4% are out on the streets.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
It's a shocking figure, and I was driven the other day by a guy recently retired from the Met, and he said he saw in his 35 years in the police force a massive cultural change, a change in terms of what was seen to be a serious crime and not, but also a change in bureaucracy, paperwork, and office work. So, Chris, I think you, like me, are beginning to lose faith in the police. The reasons why are complex. Thank you. I'm going to go to South London to Josh, who's a new caller to the show. Josh, good evening.
Good evening. The first thing I'd like to say is I've been around the world, I've travelled the world, and we have, by far, the best police force in the world, bar none. However, they can't run without money, and so that's a major problem. But I'd like to make 2 points. One, as someone who works with the police, who works on nightclub doors and arrests people and detain people and work hand in hand with the police, for a senior police officer to lock himself in the car when that situation is going on at Westminster is nothing short of cowardice.
I think I agree, Josh. It's a strong word, but I think I agree with you.
And secondly, looking at that footage, and I'm trained to the same level, it's called OST, Officer Safety Training.
Yep.
The officers did not use at any point the training that they're supposed to use, whether it is physical use of force to restrain arms or to use the safety equipment that they've got, that they had on them. They were simply overwhelmed. They lost the plot. And I challenge any police officer, serving or not serving, to have watched that video and say to me, that is the techniques we use to restrain people. And going back to the Federation, if it wasn't for a member of the public with a helmet, a motorbiker, who'd stepped into that situation, they wouldn't have arrested anybody.
Are you, Josh, are you suggesting to me that those unfortunate police officers that suffered those attacks were frankly not quite up to it in terms of training?
No. They didn't demonstrate anything. They were originally, when they stopped the car, they were 3-on-1. Sorry, they were 3-on-2.
Yeah.
One of the suspects ran away, leaving them on 2-on-2. Then the second one ran away, leaving them 2-on-1. Okay. They were so perplexed on their situation. They didn't see the person running 100 yards down the road and kicking them.
And that's what you see on the video, isn't it? But Josh, regardless of that, what happened to them was awful, and a member of the public just filmed it and mocked it, which is pretty horrid, isn't it?
Yes and no. The fact that they filmed it, that's evidence. That's evidence that no one else has got. They wouldn't have had the evidence, and the members of the public wouldn't see the sort of violence that police officers face. So filming the video is a good thing.
Okay.
Clearly mocking the police officers is a bad thing. So I think you've got good and bad in that situation.
Do you think, Josh, that ordinary folk out there think the police are on their side still, to the extent they'd be prepared to step in?
I think they do. I think people need to be honest. The police have been cut so far that they can't do the job properly.
No. OK, Josh, thank you for that and your insight. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:16. Go to lbc.co.uk. See the shocking footage in South London over the weekend of two police officers being really badly, violently assaulted. And it all being filmed on an iPhone with a commentary over the top, rather mocking what was happening. Now, the point that was just made to me was actually the video of itself was useful because it is evidence, and I do understand that point. But when we're urged very strongly by the head of the Met Police Federation, Ken Marsh, that, come on, Joe Public, get involved, help us if we're in trouble. That's all well and good if we feel the police are on our side, and increasingly we don't. And this is not the fault, I don't think, of individual police officers. I think it's the fact that so few of them are actually out there on the street getting involved with this stuff. So many are stuck in offices, and there's been a change of priorities. 1,000. And I'm sorry, folks, if you're living outside London, don't think these arguments don't apply to you, because they actually do. 1,000 police officers in the Met investigating hate crime. I wonder whether that is the right priority. Tracy urges on Facebook, don't lose faith in the police. It's the government cutbacks. Tracy, I don't doubt the cutbacks have had an impact, but I do believe that it's more than that. But there is there is some genuine public concern about a change of attitude from some police. Nigel, when my brother attempted to hand a CCTV recording, mugshots, number plates, everything, of his motorcycle theft over to a desk sergeant, the Met officer chucked it back at him and said, "You're insured, aren't you?" You know, Steve, I do understand that people do feel that, and we're being told now that 999 may not be responded to, that they want us to log reports of burglaries online. Actually, it's the more the public, I think, interact on a one-to-one basis with the police, the more faith and trust and belief they will have in them. Because I must admit, 99% of the police officers I've met on a personal basis, I've liked very much indeed. We must support the police and step in, but they've got to support us. They become rather cynical at times, and many seem bitter, says Matt in Sussex. Well, Matt, I think you'll find that actually morale, I think amongst many of our police, is pretty low. And Corinna on Facebook says, I've lost faith in the police, and lots of you talking about the cutbacks. And I do understand that, but I believe it's about more than just cutbacks. That's my view. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. John is a new caller from Basingstoke. Good evening, John.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. What I wanted to say was I think it's very dangerous to conflate the position the police have been put in by politicians and the choices that senior officers have been forced to make with officers on the ground taking a hammer in. I think you can't excuse the type of behaviour you're seeing against officers.
Nobody is, John. Nobody is.
Okay, but that's sometimes how it feels. I think you have to remember that forces are, some of them are at breaking point now, and they literally are responding to the most serious offences in order to protect people. And they are, by the very nature of it, having to look at other types of crime and say, nobody's going to get hurt. It has been traumatic. Take burglary, for example. I, for one, I'm a police officer. Burglary is a terrible crime. 99% of people who've suffered a burglary, it's happened. They're not in any danger. The offenders are away from the scene, and all the evidence will remain there. So if some forces ask people to report it online, sometimes that's to free up call handlers to take more urgent calls.
But John, I get the logic of what you're saying, but can you not see that in terms of the public's faith and belief in the police force, what they want is a human presence?
Absolutely. If you've never called the police in your life, and the one time you do because your house has been burgled, you're going to be upset. I absolutely understand that. But as somebody who lives it every day, there are thousands of calls coming in daily, and there are just nowhere near the number of officers to deal with it.
How long have you, John? How long have you been a police officer?
I joined late in life. I joined at 40, and I've been in 12 years now.
Okay.
So I've seen the recent decline that we're working under.
And how is morale, John, in the police?
I was in the army for 25 years before.
Right.
If you ask anyone what morale's like, nobody ever says morale's high. I've never known a time, morale's relative. Yes, people aren't happy with the workload. They're not happy with the fact that they're rushed off their feet. They're not happy with the fact that they can't do the job that they want to do. But unless there is a massive injection of funding to allow us to recruit more police officers, I can't see that things are going to change.
And I'm not disagreeing with that, John. Can I just ask you finally, very quickly, do you think it's right that the Metropolitan Police has 1,000 dedicated police officers dealing with hate crime?
I've heard this number bandied around, and I don't believe it's correct. I think if you were to Google that now... No, the Met Police themselves told us that. But they boasted about it, John. Yes, I think you'll find that the figure is 900 officers who are currently working on, I think it's borough safety teams that investigate mostly domestic violence, but also hate crimes. I think the recent update is, I think a lot of emphasis was put on how many people are investigating it, but it isn't purely hate crime. And let's be honest, a hate crime can be a murder. A hate crime can be somebody having bricks put through their windows nightly. Let's not accept that it's just people being rude to each other on Twitter. You know, there's the whole gambit from murder to the very basic that comes under the auspices of hate crime.
Yeah, I have to say, I think maybe maybe this whole thing needs a bit of rethinking. Maybe a murder's a murder, whatever the motive. John, thank you very much indeed for your call. And John there, making it very clear that they desperately need more resources. They are overstretched. And I do sympathise with that, but I still, he makes the point, and John himself makes the point. You may have never called the police in your life. You've just been burgled and you're told to register online. It's not going to make you naturally pro the police. It doesn't work. Joe is calling from Cardiff. Good evening, Joe.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm okay. So the poor old police, they've had massive cutbacks. But do you feel, Joe, they're still on your side, perhaps in the way you did 10, 20 years ago?
Definitely, absolutely not. I think that the police these days are being used by the corporations, unfortunately, such as the bailiffs. They are taking up more time when they go in to evict a person because they say that it won't be peaceful. They are being used by the corporates. Unfortunately, I don't believe that the police are looking into crimes such as frauds where money could be saved and potentially put back into the Treasury. I don't see why there can't be more of a designated unit for that, to look into the frauds, as I said. If there was more money then from these frauds put back into the police force, policing would be more visible, and I'm sure that the public would then change their opinion of them, because I don't see everybody I speak to out there has a very positive words to say about the police. And yes, I say this out of experience purely because I reported several crimes to the police that unfortunately they still have not taken a statement from. But however, my MP, who I won't mention, is going to take this up with the Police and Crime Commissioner on my behalf.
What sort of crimes, Joe?
Oh, they were serious crimes. I'm talking about abuse of an elderly person, somebody abusing an animal, not only financially, but also physically. But the point I'm trying to raise is here, there's a huge movement on the internet at the moment regarding Finchley Road. And why won't anybody investigate Finchley Road? There's never any smoke without fire.
I don't know. Joe, I'm not going to get into any specific. I just can't do that, but thank you. Metropolitan Police on Twitter, just to back up my point, we have 900 plus specialist officers across London dedicated to investigating all hate crime. That is what they were cheering about. And on Twitter, I get, if the police won't even protect themselves by carrying guns, why should the public help them? And those that listen regularly to the Nigel Farage Show will know I've been arguing month after month after month. Our police must be armed with an absolute minimum of a taser, and that incident, and do go to lbc.co.uk and have a look at that violent assault. Had the police had tasers, there would not have been a problem. Similarly, on London Bridge, lives could have been saved. A brave police officer there with his baton, getting cut, getting stabbed in the eye. If he'd had a taser or a gun, would have been a very different situation. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:30 in time. I want to support the police. I do understand why we're being urged after this shocking attack that was filmed over the weekend, this assault on 2 police officers. I understand why the head of the Metropolitan Police Federation is urging us as members of the public to intervene to help police officers in trouble. But I really struggle with it, given that police officers don't carry tasers, and that quite often I just worry, I question the priorities of policing, whether we really feel they're on our side anymore. Goodness me, if you're burgled and told to register it online, you're not going to feel great about the police. And yet, I'm sure more money is part of the problem. Before I get back to that, the European Research Group, the ERG, the hardliners, now they were the ones pushing to get the number of letters in to get this vote on Mrs May's future. They were the ones pushing hard, and their shop steward, Steve Baker, said this just a couple of days ago.
Well, I'm afraid it's leaked out of a WhatsApp group that earlier today I said that my count is over 48 with another almost a dozen probables on top. But as I've told colleagues since that leak, only Graham knows the accurate number. My number will be inaccurate because people will withdraw letters. They'll tell me they've put letters in when they haven't. They'll take them out and not tell you they've taken out. They'll say they've submitted them when they haven't, and so forth.
Well, if you know your numbers are inaccurate, maybe best, Steve Baker, not actually to say anything, because you up the ante to say, look, we're pretty much there. And then, of course, Jacob came out from the Commons and announced that he was submitting his letter. And at close of play last night, we knew there were 27 declared. We know there are more, but we just don't know how many more. Well, there was an ERG press conference this morning, and Jacob, of course, had to respond to the fact that they hadn't, as they predicted, made the 48 letters by close of play yesterday.
As for letters, patience is a virtue, virtue is a grace, etc. And we shall see where the letters come in due time, and there's a meaningful vote as well, and we'll see what happens with that.
Not an easy day for Jacob, not an easy day for the European Research Group, and they are being much parodied and being much mocked. And I suspect that quite a lot of people they thought would put letters in. But, you know, when you're a Tory MP and you're over 55 and you've been there for a few years and you think on principle you ought to rebel, but then, of course, you know what happens to Tory MPs when they retire, if they've been good boys and good girls, they go to the House of Lords, and rebels don't go to the House of Lords, and that's why these rebellions are always smaller than you think they are going to be. And Jacob did go on to say there's a very real danger that a split could come in the party if the Prime Minister got the deal through on the back of Labour votes. And as we know, Mrs May is heading off tomorrow evening to meet Mr Juncker, a 5:30 p.m. meeting. I've got a feeling the old drinks cabinet could be rattling a bit at around about that time. And then on Sunday, of course, there'll be this mini summit to finalise the deal, and I shall have the copy of all 585 pages under my arm to take there with me, and we'll broadcast from there on Sunday morning between 10 and 12. And then at some point, within a couple of weeks after that, there is going to be this big vote, and it is going to be one of the biggest parliamentary votes of our time at the moment. The numbers suggest the government can't win, but then the numbers suggested that 48 letters were going to be in, and they haven't emerged. Is it that the government are managing to whittle down the opposition against it? It's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks. I very much hope that's not the case, but hey, I saw it all before 25 years ago with Maastricht. Back to policing. On Facebook, Mark says, assault on the uniformed officers was seen as a big deal by cops years ago. The new generation don't seem to care. Well, also, Mark, if you're convicted of assaulting a police officer, the punishment is 6 months. Perhaps it ought to be 6 years. Although, of course, I'll then be told we haven't got enough room in our prisons. The criminal base in this country has grown hugely. Serious violent crime is on the rise. We are losing control of our streets in our cities, certainly on Friday and Saturday nights. We have got a problem. I am naturally pro-police, but I wonder at the moment whether you feel, as I feel, that they're not always quite on our side. I hope I'm not being unfair. Harry is a new caller from Southend. Good evening, Harry.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, I believe you're a former police officer.
I am, yes. The subject you're talking about is quite close to my heart because I've only recently left after serving for 14 years.
Yes.
And the reason why I left, I could take up the rest of your show for you. There's
Please don't, Harry. There are some other callers.
There's obviously a huge issue that many of your callers have referred to tonight with the funding issue. We was unfortunately under a period of time from an exceptionally poor Home Secretary, who's now an exceptionally poor Prime Minister, and she's absolutely destroyed the police service. And personally, I believe that's for personal gain, but that's another story. But there's lots more than just cuts here going on. There is cuts to mental health services, there's cuts to the NHS, it's cuts across the board that they've taken under their wing that are causing so many issues because police officers are now having to act as social services as well. They're also having to act as people that are looking for missing people constantly, all the time. They are acting as everything other than police officers. They don't get the time to go out there and conduct their job. And this is where one of the previous police officers, one of your callers, referred to low morale. I mean, in the police service I worked in, the morale was through the floor. People just didn't want to be doing that job anymore. And that showed because people were leaving the job with decades worth of experience, and they just weren't completing their service because they were scared of doing their job anymore because of the consequences it carried for them. Now, I'm not...
And Harry, tell me something. When you made an arrest, how much time did that take you in filling in office, forms and paperwork in the office?
Well, let's put it this way. There's a lot of the latter years of my career were mostly domestic violence arrests because that's generally a huge call in Essex. Mm-hmm. And as a result of domestic violence call, if you got that, say, an hour into your 10-hour duty, you would probably be dealing there with that for the rest of your duty.
Yeah.
In the ways of getting that person back to the station, getting them booked into custody, making sure their welfare was okay, making sure that the person's welfare that's been assaulted and in which way was dealt with, making sure you had a statement, and possibly going into interview if you had the time. If you didn't, you had to hand it over to the next shift.
So, on average, Harry, how many arrests a week would you make?
In all honesty, it would depend on the area that you covered. But
you were doing domestic violence. I'm asking you specifically, before you retired, how many arrests a week would you expect to make?
Every single day. Every single day on duty, you'd be making arrests.
Okay. Harry, is it just money? Or are the police badly led in terms of priorities?
They are very badly led.
Yeah,
I mean,
quite.
I take you back to your first caller tonight, who said about the cowardice of the acting commander.
Unbelievable.
Personally, how he's not been prosecuted is beyond me for neglect of duty. It's absolutely outrageous to sit there and watch another officer be stabbed to death while he keeps himself safe.
Yeah,
absolutely,
pretty awful,
unacceptable.
No, absolutely. Harry, great call. Thank you. Going to Salisbury to speak to James, a new caller. Good evening, James.
Good evening. In terms of, I think the police, especially in Salisbury, with what happened with the whole Novichok and Russians and what have you, they couldn't have been any better. Having police officers come from all corners of the country to help support the public, try and keep them as updated as legally possible and not try and cause panic or anything like that. But I think it doesn't just come down to the individual officers. I think it also comes down to, what else the country has in terms of resources. I mean, you've got Larkhill, you've got Bulford, you've got Tidworth, filled with soldiers that are doing absolutely sweet FA. There's, all right, there are things going on abroad still, but the majority of them are sat around twiddling thumbs. You get up in the morning, you go to the gym, you come back, and that is it. Why are we not training these people to either train further officers or use them just as a simple deterrent?
But I mean, James, you joined the army and you're effectively a trained killer. You are a trained killer, aren't you?
No.
What do you mean, no?
Yes, you're a soldier first, and I served 7 years with the army.
All right.
But your basic training...
What was your job, James, as a soldier?
I was a UAV operator.
Okay, but your job was to go to war if necessary, wasn't it?
If necessary, yes.
Yes.
So, but that's the same similar sort of thing as saying that every police officer is there trained to...
Arrest people.
Well,
they are.
Yes, but you've got to think about skill fade. Not every single police officer is out there on the beat. We wish...
I know that. So are you arguing, James, that we should have a lot more soldiers trained to be police officers when they leave the army, perhaps? Would that be a practical thing?
Well, the after services and the aftercare for the army could be a damn sight better
than it is,
especially for people like myself. But I really do think if you've got the resources there, I mean, who's going to turn around and say, I don't want a soldier hanging around outside my house because... You feel safe.
And on the point of soldiers, I have been out in Salisbury on Friday and Saturday nights and I won't name the camp because it wouldn't be fair, but one particular regiment were in town and they were aged between sort of 19 and 23. They're all single lads on a night out, and as I think is a sort of tradition of our soldiery, they were having a pretty raucous time of it. If I was to walk through Salisbury this Friday or Saturday night, and there were lots and lots of squaddies out who'd had a lot to drink, would there be police officers there? Would I feel safe, James?
I think you'd find more military police kicking around the town.
Right, OK, that's probably the answer then, isn't it? James, thanks very much indeed for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:45. Do we feel the police are on our side? And I think increasingly we don't. I think they've been very badly led. I question many of their priorities. I do understand, though, the points about underfunding. If the police say they won't come out to investigate burglaries, then you can't expect the public to support them, says Damien on Twitter. Damien, that's the point I'm making. I think we're losing our touch with the police. We're told, just fill it in online. It's almost as if we're going through the exercise purely for our insurance company rather than for criminals actually being caught. And it's because of that, I think, that much of Middle England does not have quite the same level of respect for the police that it did a few years ago. And I'm saying that to you folks honestly as somebody who is a naturally very pro-police person. I really, really am, although not so pro bosses sitting in cars watching colleagues getting stabbed outside the Palace at Westminster. Ryan is a new caller from Sydenham. Good evening, Ryan.
Hello, Nigel. I think it must be a cold agreeing with you.
Well, democracy and debate's a funny old thing, Ryan. You never know.
There you go.
Anyway, welcome.
On this subject, I'm thinking that I work in pubs. I do pub work, and obviously I've had a lot of interaction with the police over the years. My previous pub was actually in the heart of East London, where a lot of these things are going on, and my current pub is actually at Overcoast at Sue Merton, just round the corner, in fact. So I'm no stranger to this kind of thing. What I have seen over the years is I've seen the respect for the police going out the window. I mean, as you are so right to point out, it is not aided by a chief of police who's locking himself and hiding in his vehicle.
Shocking.
However, I think what I'm seeing happening more and more is when I speak to the police, and don't get me wrong, I am in my role, obviously running pubs, I could not be doing that without the 100% support in both directions with the police. So I've got massive respect for what they do. Relating to would I have personally helped out in this situation? I know that I would have personally, but that's because I'm used to dealing with confrontation. I'm 18.5 stone, and I'm not too scared about throwing myself into these situations. Would I have one of my friends do so? No.
And Ryan, tell me, have you been trained?
In certain different elements, not through my work or whatever. I've done a small amounts of martial arts or the rest of it.
Right. I'm not going to take you on, Ryan. I promise. But yeah.
No, it's literally it's a case of I don't feel so fearful about these situations. However, there's a very good chance that if you do decide to jump up and help the police in this situation, you're going to end up getting stabbed. You're going to end up getting fitted up by someone who recognises you and you're helping to put away a local gangster and all the rest of it. I know that in these situations, I run to the aid of someone. It's in my nature. I would not ask anyone else from the average public to go and do the same thing because of the risk they put themselves in.
And given Ryan this gang culture, and you just sort of hinted at this a little bit, a very interesting little comment you made there. So we've got gangs, and I guess drugs are the big business of these gangs above everything else, and we know that that's out. And you must, as a pub owner, must be one of your biggest nightmares in terms of dealing with it. But Ryan, is the gang culture such that if I, living as part of a local community, was to intervene, and that intervention perhaps helped a member of a gang get arrested and go to prison, would my family get harassed?
You wouldn't want to take that risk because you know that there's always going to be a good chance that that's going to happen. The level of respect coming from these guys that are running around in these gangs is so minimal for anything other than street culture, making money, and saving face on the street. Therefore, this is exactly the kind of situation I was talking about. Why would you put yourself in a position? I would never ask one of my friends to put themselves in a position where that could happen. Right. What is needed is the police need more robust training. Yes. They need to be able to be more hands-on with people so that they can. I mean, now, from the moment they pull a baton, from the moment they pull CS, from the moment they do anything, they're tied up in paperwork. How can they do their jobs? Well, this is holding back this kind of wave of feral so-and-sos on the street when everything they do, they're held to account for.
Clearly the physicality of our police matters. I mean, Rick says to me on Twitter, he says, the problem is they're not getting proper training. We should probably recruit more ex-military. And I think that's probably right, isn't it? We need big, strong men and women to be our police because, goodness me, they are facing some terrible challenges on our street. Ron, great call. pleased that you and I agree on something. That's great. Do call again when you disagree, please. We'll be very pleased to hear from you. But Ryan's point there about gang culture, about if you get involved, actually that could finish up threatening your own family, just shows you the state that not just London, but many of our big cities are in. It's pretty chilling in many ways. Let's go to the northeast, to Durham, and speak to Dan, who's a new caller. Good evening, Dan.
Hi, Nigel.
So, what do you think about this debate? Would you get involved to help the police if they were in trouble?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Why?
Do you think that a copper, if I was to be arrested for saying something nasty on the internet, that a copper would turn around and say, do you know what, this law isn't right. He's just said something. The government doesn't agree with it. It's not right that he should be charged. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to arrest this man. No, so why should I show the same courtesy to a copper?
Do you know, Dan, I think what you've just said is something that quite a lot of people will agree with. And, you know, when we see albeit London, but it's the same principle everywhere. The Met Police on Twitter saying we have 900 plus specialist officers across London dedicated to investigating all hate crime. It does, Dan, make us wonder about their priorities, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. I came on the internet to watch LBC because I normally watch it on YouTube.
Yes.
You live stream your show. And there was an advert on there saying about reporting hate speech on YouTube. The government took money by me from me by force in my tax money and spent it on an advert telling them me they're going to lock me in prison.
If you say something nasty, Dan, well, don't say anything nasty, Dan, otherwise you'll be in big trouble. You'll be in big trouble.
They complain about money, but they put a helicopter in the air, sent crime scene units to go have a look at these people's house who put that video of the Grenfell effigy on. You think if they're tight up, they wouldn't be sending a bloody helicopter when they don't need to. Sorry about the language.
That's all right. Dan, got to love you and leave you. Got time. Craig, very quickly, from Tunbridge Wells, a new caller. Hi, Craig.
Hello, Nigel. Good evening. I've got a shop in Orpington, and we've been broken into a couple of times this year, and we just don't even bother calling the police now.
Give it up.
Absolute waste of time. Yeah. My house was burgled by actually a Romanian guy about 2 years ago. Had 2 vans stolen, £40,000 worth of stock taken, and reported it to the police. The Romanian police intercepted the vans with all the tools at the Romanian border, and the police told me they couldn't issue an international European arrest warrant because they can't afford it.
Oh dear, Craig. Horrible. I'm sorry to hear your plight. That is absolutely awful. I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry. I'd love to spend longer with Craig. But I do feel, folks, a lot of you are not as trusting of the way the police operate as they were just a few short years ago. And because of that, we're less reluctant, we're less keen to get involved. That's how I feel. You've been listening to my show on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night here in London at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick. But next, it's Ian.